cry baby, they cut her uniform with training knife. Then Navy SEAL disarmed them in one move. Sometimes the worst moments happen in the quiet corners of training grounds, places meant to build strength, not break hearts. This story begins on a cold morning, with a uniform torn, a girl humiliated, and a Navy SEAL who stepped forward when everyone else stood frozen. "Don't cry, baby girl, or this gets uglier." The words sliced through the silent gym, cruel and sharp. Emily Carter lay pinned against the mat, breath shaking, eyes wide. A dull training knife pressed into her collarbone, dragging just enough force to make her uniform tear. 3 men hovered over her, bigger, older, louder. They weren't supposed to be touching her. They weren't even part of her training group, but rules meant nothing when the door was closed and everyone else looked away. One of them tugged her sleeve, ripping the fabric down the side. Another laughed, quiet and mean. "Told you she'd break easy." Emily didn't scream, she didn't fight, she didn't even move. She just swallowed the taste of fear and kept breathing. Across the room, sitting on a bench with his laces barely tied, someone paused. A man with tired eyes, a shaved jawline, and a calm stillness that didn't match the chaos around him. Retired Navy SEAL Jack Thomason had come to the base for a 2-week consulting rotation. He wasn't supposed to intervene, but when he heard that soft, broken breath escape Emily's throat, something inside him shifted. Emily had joined the Coast Guard training program at 23, quiet and determined, hoping to build the kind of strength she'd never had growing up. She wasn't a fighter, not naturally. Her confidence was gentle, almost fragile, shaped by years of being told she was too sensitive, too soft, too emotional. Her mother called her cry-baby when she was little, jokingly, lovingly. But the boys in her neighborhood used it differently, with sharper edges. And even now, years later, in uniform and boots, that name still lived in the back of her mind. She worked twice as hard as everyone else in her class, arriving before sunrise, staying long after the halls emptied. She taped her hands when blisters split, iced her shins at night, whispered to herself in the mirror, "I can do this. Just hold on." But some men didn't care how hard she trained. Some just wanted to remind her she didn't belong. The 3 who cornered her had been waiting for a moment when instructors weren't watching, and today they found it. What Emily didn't know was that someone else in the room had seen this pattern before and lost someone he loved because no one stepped in. Jack Thomason wasn't supposed to care. He had retired 2 years earlier after a decade of deployments he never talked about. He carried invisible scars, quiet ones. The kind that hid under routine, under silence, under the weight of memory. His wife used to tell him he had war eyes, eyes that could see danger before it arrived, eyes that noticed what others ignored. And that morning, while the cold air from the metal vents swept through the training gym, Jack felt that old instinct stir. His fingers tightened on the bench, his breath slowed. His body shifted forward by an inch, small, barely noticeable, but full of intent. He watched Emily's hands tremble as the training knife traced the skin near her collarbone. He saw her jaw lock, saw the tears she refused to let fall, saw the way her shoulders curled inward, collapsing like someone who had learned to disappear. He recognized the look. He had seen it on young recruits during his SEAL years. He had seen it on his younger sister before she died, a girl no one defended when bullying swallowed her whole. Jack stood up, quietly, deliberately, as if remembering something he should never have forgot. Emily felt the grip on her hair tighten. The guy leaning over her breath smelled like old coffee and arrogance. The knife sliced another inch downward, catching the fabric of her training shirt. She heard threads snap, heard laughter echo under the metal rafters. Her heartbeat climbed her throat, her vision blurred. A familiar panic returned, the same one she fought years ago in high school locker rooms when boys cornered her just to watch her flinch. "Stop moving," one of them muttered, but she wasn't moving at all. She was shrinking. The gym was usually noisy during free periods, full of clashing boots and chatter, but now it was unbearably still, too still. Something shifted in the air, a pressure change, subtle, like the moment before a storm strikes. Emily's eyes lifted, trying to find anyone, just one person, who might step in. That's when she saw a shadow detach itself from the far wall. Not rushing, not yelling, just walking forward with a calmness that felt more dangerous than the knife at her throat. The bullies didn't notice him yet, but Emily did. And for the first time that morning, she exhaled. Jack didn't raise his voice, didn't warn them, didn't give them the courtesy of a countdown. He walked until he stood 3 feet away, hands loose at his sides, posture relaxed in a way that made the men mistake him for harmless. The one holding the knife smirked. "Walk away, old man. Training exercise." Jack tilted his head slightly, as if studying a predictable pattern in their stance. Then everything blurred. His left hand trapped the knife wrist, twisting it at an angle no human reflex could fight. His right hand drove into the attacker's elbow, forcing the knife free without cutting Emily. In the same breath, he swept the second man's leg with a precision born from years of CQB drills, sending him crashing to the floor. The third barely reacted before Jack stepped into his space, using his own momentum to flip him flat on his back, wind knocked out clean. 3 men, 1 move each, over in less than 4 seconds. The knife clattered across the mat. Emily lay frozen, eyes wide, breath halted mid-chest. Jack finally looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with a softness she hadn't seen in years. "Hey," he said quietly, "you're safe now." For a long moment, no one moved. The gym echoed with the sound of 3 grown men groaning on the ground, their confidence shattered faster than the breath knocked from their lungs. Emily pushed herself up slowly, arms shaking. Her torn sleeve hung loose, exposing the pale line of fear across her shoulder. She kept her eyes down, fighting the instinct to apologize for something that wasn't her fault. Jack didn't hover over her, didn't rush in like some hero in a movie. He simply crouched to her level, giving her space she didn't even know she needed. "You hurt anywhere?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, but her voice betrayed her. "I'm fine. I froze." Jack studied her carefully, not in a way that made her feel small, but in a way that made her feel seen. "Freezing doesn't mean weakness," he said. "It means your brain was trying to survive." Emily blinked. No instructor had ever said that to her. Behind them, the doors slammed open as 2 senior officers rushed in, alerted by the commotion. Their eyes widened at the scene, 3 men on the ground, 1 retired SEAL standing calm, and a young woman holding what was left of her dignity. Everything was about to change. They moved Emily into a quiet meeting room, away from the stares and whispers. A first aid kit sat unopened on the table. A bottle of water waited beside it. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the cold creep in, the kind that came after adrenaline left the body. Jack stood near the door, speaking only when she looked overwhelmed. He didn't push, didn't interrogate, he just stayed. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to," he said softly, but something inside Emily cracked. Not loudly, just a small fracture enough for the truth to slip through. "I'm tired," she whispered, "of proving I belong, of pretending I'm not scared, of being everyone's easy target." Jack nodded once, like he'd heard these words before. Too many times from people he never got to save. "You know," he said slowly, "the strongest people I ever met were the ones who didn't hide that they hurt." Emily looked up, eyes glossy. "No one else ever said that to me." "Then they weren't looking close enough." Silence filled the room, gentle instead of heavy. This wasn't the moment she healed, but it was the moment she realized healing was possible. Jack didn't like talking about his past. Most of it lived behind doors he'd locked long ago, doors filled with sand, gunpowder, and the faces of people he couldn't forget. But when Emily asked quietly, "Why did you help me?" he exhaled, long and tired. "My sister," he said, voice barely above a breath. "She was small, gentle. Everyone thought that made her weak." He rubbed the scar on his forearm. One he never explained to anyone. "When she was 16, some boys cornered her after school. No one stepped in, not one person." Emily's breath caught. "What happened to her?" Jack's jaw tightened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. "She never recovered, not really. Years later, I joined the SEALs, but the guilt—" He shook his head. "It stays, even when the uniforms change, even when you try to outrun it." Emily felt a quiet ache for him, the kind that came from recognizing someone else's pain because it looked too much like your own. "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "Someone should have been there." He looked at her, really looked. "Today, I had the chance to be that someone." By afternoon, the base commander ordered a formal evaluation. The 3 men who attacked Emily sat lined against the wall, each wearing the same expression, fear coated in fake confidence. Their excuses spilled out quickly. "She misread training. She overreacted. We were testing her response under pressure. But the knife." The torn uniform, the bruises forming on Emily's arms, they told a different story. Jack stood beside her, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. His calm presence seemed to silence the room more effectively than any rank could. When Emily was asked to speak, her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "They didn't test me," she said. "They tried to break me." The room shifted. One of the officers cleared his throat. "Retired Chief Thomason, your statement." Jack didn't give a speech, didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "If I had been 30 seconds later, we wouldn't be sitting in a hearing. We'd be writing a report." Silence hit like a punch. The decision came quickly. The 3 men were removed from the training program pending further investigation. But Emily didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed and very, very tired. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The ceiling of her barracks room felt too close, the dark too loud. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the cold of the mat and the pressure of the knife. So she laced her running shoes and stepped outside. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and wet earth. The base lights cast long shadows across the empty track. Emily started jogging, slow at first, then faster, pushing her breath until her lungs burned. Her thoughts spun. Why couldn't I fight back? Why do I always freeze? Why am I like this? A second pair of footsteps joined her rhythm. Jack, running beside her without a word, matching her pace. "Couldn't sleep?" he finally asked. "No," she said. "You either." He shook his head. "Not anymore." They ran in silence, just the sound of gravel and breathing. Emily slowed, stopping under a flickering lamp. Tears burned behind her eyes. "I hate that they got to me," she said. Jack looked at her with the softness of someone who understood too well. "They didn't get to you," he said. "They exposed something you've been carrying a long time. Now we deal with it." Emily let out a shaky breath. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. For years, he had carried a weight no one saw, a weight made of silence and responsibility. He never complained, never blamed, never broke in front of anyone. People around him saw strength, but they never saw the private war he fought every single day. And deep down, he always wondered, will my sacrifices ever be enough? He replayed every past failure in his head like a movie, stuck on repeat. Every time someone doubted him, every time life pushed him down, every time he wanted to scream, but stayed silent. He carried all of it. But standing there now, hearing his son's words, feeling his mother's hands on his shoulders, and remembering the storm he walked through to get here, for the first time in years, he forgave himself, not for others, for him, because he finally understood. The weight you carry becomes lighter. The moment you admit you've carried enough. He looked at the mirror again. But this time, he saw something different. Not the man who failed, not the man who broke, not the man who spent years trying to prove his worth. He saw a man who survived, a man who did not quit even when quitting felt easier, a man who rebuilt himself with nothing but willpower and belief, a man who walked through darkness and still chose light. And suddenly, something inside him opened. A softness, a clarity, a truth he had forgotten. I am allowed to believe in myself. I am allowed to rise. I am allowed to start again. The world hadn't changed, but he had, and that changed everything. It happened 3 days later. He was sitting on the balcony, sipping tea, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in years. When his phone rang, he almost didn't pick up, but when he did, the voice on the other side made his heart stop. It was his old mentor, the one who once told him he would never make it, the one whose rejection broke him. But today, his tone was completely different. "I heard what you did," he said, "how you rebuilt everything from nothing, how you came back stronger, how you helped your family rise with you." There was a long pause. "I misjudged you," he finally said, "and I want to offer you something big." The world froze. He felt tears sting behind his eyes. Life has a strange way of returning to those who refuse to stop walking. He arrived at the office of the mentor who once doubted him, but he didn't walk in scared. He didn't walk in small. He didn't walk in trying to earn approval. He walked in as the man he had become, confident, grounded, purpose-driven. The room that once intimidated him now felt different. He was not here to prove anything. He was here because he deserved to be. The mentor greeted him with a smile he had never seen before. "Humbled," he said, "that's how I feel today." He offered him a partnership, a role that would change the future of his family forever. But inside him, something even bigger happened. He realized that success tastes different when you've earned it through scars. That evening, he gathered his family in the living room. the same place where years ago he had broken down silently, thinking he had failed everyone. But today he stood tall. He looked at the faces he loved most, faces that had cried with him, prayed for him, and stood beside him even when he didn't feel worthy. And he said, "I didn't rise alone. You were my strength when I had none. Everything I become from this point forward, I become because of you." His mother cried first. Then his son hugged him tighter than ever. And in that moment, he felt the kind of peace that comes only after winning a war no one else saw. This is not just his story. This is the story of anyone who feels like life has pushed them too far, who feels like they're failing quietly, who feels like the world has forgotten them. But listen carefully. You are allowed to rise again. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to start over at any age. Your past does not define you. Your failures do not define you. Your scars do not define you. What defines you is the moment you decide that your story isn't over. So take a breath. Wipe the dust off your shoulders and take one step forward, because the comeback you're praying for